And in our class 4, in our big 4 gambling arena, which is pokies, lotto, TABs and casinos, nearly $2.5 billion is lost every year. That is more than all the Treaty of Waitangi settlements to date is lost every year to those 4 forms of gambling. The majority of that, almost $1 billion a year, is lost to pokie machines. Over 30% of the money lost on pokies comes from people experiencing harm from gambling. While gambling harm can affect people from all walks of life, those living at the lower end of the socioeconomic scale suffer the most, and the people most likely to be harmed by gambling include women, sole parent families, Māori and Pacific people, refugees and migrants, people living with disability and beneficiaries, and people in low paid employment. In other words, our most vulnerable communities are harmed the most by gambling. There are very strong links between gambling and significant social issues such as domestic violence, child neglect and abuse, depression, anxiety, substance addictions, as has already been shown, crime and suicide. It is thought that almost 7% of New Zealand adults are currently at risk from their gambling, with many more people affected by the gambling of others. And again, Debbie has testified to this. Close to 200,000 New Zealanders are harmed by gambling, which is about 3 times the population of Shelwin. Effective policies are one of the strongest means of addressing this threat. Salvation Army Oasis would also like to see an end to community dependence on gambling profits. A reliance on funding provided by gambling societies creates a moral dilemma for any community service who is trying to help people at the lower end of the socioeconomic scale or in any form of difficulty. Their integrity can be compromised by accepting money that is largely obtained through the suffering of the people that they are often trying to help. In our view, the community funding does not offset the harm by gambling, and harm minimisation should be in the first place. That should be the highest point. Community groups deserve access to funding that does not compromise their integrity and purpose. Some councils have resolved to lobby central government for a more sustainable model of funding for community organisations, and we would encourage the Shelwin Council to do this. Just a little bit about gambling in the Shelwin district. We've supported 17 clients from Shelwin in the last year, and we're very aware that this is just the tip of the iceberg. Most gamblers who experience gambling harm will not seek help. There's a very high level of shame and stigma around gambling. It's still not widely considered to be an addictive behaviour. People tend to think, well, it's a choice that people make, whereas anyone who understands addiction knows very well that when you're addicted to a substance or a behaviour, the choice is gone. Reducing the numbers of gaming machines via a sinking lid policy would give more protection to those at risk. We support a sinking lid as the most beneficial policy for reducing gambling harm. We also submit that the sinking lid be strengthened by maintaining a strict no relocations policy that does not allow a venue to relocate under any circumstances. You're currently in a very good position in Shelwin in that you have, well, actually not in a great position because you have more machines than your policy allows for, but you, as a growth community, you're in a situation where you can stop the growth of gambling harm as your community grows. You're in a good position for this currently, and we would really like to see you support that. We consider that the reduction of gambling machines within your community will reduce the harms we have discussed and contribute to a healthier community. And in the words of Paul Barrett, the son of Morgan Barrett, who passed away after losing $500,000 in 3 years on gambling, recently, this is not right. It's now up to the politicians and internal affairs. It's now up to you and us. Again, I would like to thank you very much for your time and listening to us and to hear us out. And does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, it was great to hear from all three of you. Jeff and Jenny, do you have any questions? Nothing from Jenny. Go on, Jeff.
No, I don't have any questions, but thanks very much for covering that subject. You've done it fairly thoroughly and have given me a good picture of where you're coming from. Thanks.
Thank you. And if there's any resources or further information we can send out to you, I'd be very happy to do that. Just get in touch.
Yeah, I do have a question. Do you have any research or information specifically on rural gambling machines? So we do, we've got our, sorry, we have our main townships here in Selwyn, which are quite close to Christchurch, but also we have townships that are quite further out. So
you do, yes. I would be able to find that information for you if you would like. Is there any specific places, or would you like it on each of the townships? I think I can break it down into townships within Selwyn. I'm not quite sure what I could find.
I guess it was more just nationally. Is there a difference between gambling addiction in rural and urban areas?
It's very varied. It's really interesting. Some of the worst gambling is in, I think it's Matamata, and some of the really small townships have horrendous problems. But then also Auckland and areas like that have big problems. In the bigger cities, it tends to be more the lower socioeconomic communities that have more harm. Obviously, they also have a lot more pokie machines. So the pokie machines are a far higher density in the lower socioeconomic areas, which is something else that we're really trying to mediate. Do you have anything on rural? Surely the DIA has. Yeah. We could probably find information on that if you want it.
It should be okay. Thank you. It's just kind of a general question.
Currently, Rolleston is not a huge risk. There is because of your demographic of a lot of new people coming to the area who are often highly mortgaged to the, they may have one or two incomes. The wife might have a baby, so the income might drop. Mm-hmm. They can find themselves suddenly in financial more stress than they were when they originally arrived. And that can put them into a position of risk from gambling. So this is part why we are very concerned to see that you have a strong policy to protect that growing community that you have, particularly in Rolleston. Also, yeah.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
Great to hear from you. So let me just check my wee notes. The part that happens next is, here we go. Yeah, so we're hearing several speakers today. We have closed deliberations tomorrow, just among the panel, and then there'll be a report written soon after that. But other than that, thank you very, very much for your time. And the report will probably reach council about June or July later this year.
Okay.
Obviously, we'll let you know how it goes.
Thank you very much.
Cool.
Okay.
Gaki day. Thank you.
Gaki day.
Okay, we're ready. We've got the next one in the waiting room. Do you want to wait 5 minutes, or do you want to just keep rolling with it?
Does anyone fancy a toilet break?
No. Keep going.
I'm okay.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Okay. All right.
Kia ora. Welcome to the hearing panel. Lovely to meet you. So my name is Sophie McInnes. We've got Councillor Jeff Bland here as well, and Councillor Jenny Gallagher. We also have some Selwyn District Council staff. We've got Sue Atherton over there and John Christensen, And from Food and Health Standards, we've got Jessica Neal and Rebecca Jory. Their camera is off at the moment. So yeah, we've got 20 minutes for your submission to speak, 10 minutes for questions and answers. We'll keep all our questions until the end. And just so you know as well, this is being live streamed on the council's YouTube channel. So we're live to the world. Yeah, so if you wouldn't mind taking it away, introduce yourself and let us know your thoughts on this particular issue. Thank you.
Morning, guys. Thank you very much, Sophie. My name is Hong for Hong Kong, for either remembering, but Kong is not my surname. Yeah, so I work for Asian Family Services and the Public Health Promoter, and today I'm going to support Paula. Paula is the CEO of PGF Group. She's not here yet. Yeah.
So would you prefer we wait, obviously, then until she's available as well?
It would be great. I
Okay,
think.
no worries. All right, we'll stop the clock on that one then.
Yeah. And by the way, I'm based in Wellington.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for joining us. We'll hang tight for a wee while then.
Cool. Thank you, Sophie.
Paula Snowden has now joined.
Fantastic. Kia ora, Paula, welcome.
Kia ora.
Excuse me.
Apologies if I was 30 seconds late. There's always something with Teams or Zooms. It's headphones or
Oh, totally.
laptop or something. It was headphones this time.
No worries. Well, welcome to our hearing.
Thank you.
I'm Sophie McInnes. We've also got Councillor Jeff Bland and Councillor Jenny Gallagher. We've got Selwyn District Council staff Sue Atherton and John Christensen on the line as well. And from Food and Health Standards, we've got Jessica Neal and Rebecca Jury. We had a quick wee chat with Hong, which is awesome. But yeah, so we're being live streamed. You guys have, sorry, ladies, you have 20 minutes to speak, and then we've got 10 minutes for questions and answers. And we'll keep all our questions until you finish speaking. So thank you very much.
So, kia ora. Well, tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you, Chair and Councillors, for the opportunity to comment on the Selwyn District Council's Class 4 gambling venues policy. We comment and submit on every TLA across Aotearoa. We have a good national perspective on pokies, and so every council matters to us in this space. I'm Paula Snowden. I'm the Chief Executive of Problem Gambling Group. We are made up of Mapi Maya Pacific Service, Asian Family Services, that Hong is representing, and PGF Services, which work with Māori and the general population. I hail from Ngāpuhi myself originally, although I live in Wellington, and our head office is actually in Auckland. We do clinical and public health, and we do clinical and public health together. So we have a public health perspective as well as a clinical intervention perspective. So slide 2, please, whoever's helping us with that. I can't see the slides, so I don't know if they've gone up or not.
Hello, Jessica.
Hello, yeah, sorry, we're just getting that uploaded now.
Thank you, Jessica.
Well, I'll keep talking while so we don't lose our time. And when I'm ready for slide 3, I'll just say slide 3, please. So the council would have heard from the Class 4 industry that there is a very low problem gambling rate in Selwyn and the rest of New Zealand. And the Class 4 industry say this all the time. However, it's important to realise the difference between problem gambling and harmful gambling. It's on a spectrum. Problem gamblers include people who are experiencing severe harm. This is when families and people have fallen right off the cliff. This reflects a very sharp end of those experiencing gambling harm. Gambling harm is experienced on a spectrum, and the Ministry of Health estimates that 250,000 people, or the population of Wellington, experience mild, moderate, and severe gambling harm in New Zealand. And if you think that New Zealanders are losing nearly $1 billion a year into pokie machines, a year, nearly $1 billion, you can see why the spectrum of harm goes unrecognised. The problem gambling stuff doesn't capture people such as family, friends, employees, employers who may be affected by someone's gambling. Research shows that typically 6 people are affected by a person who experiences harmful gambling, and Māori and Pacific peoples are twice as likely. Part of this is a product of the fact of where the machines are. They're over 50% are in low decile communities. Next slide, please. Not all gambling is the same. Class 4 gambling, it's pokies in pubs, clubs and TABs. And also, by the way, when you add pokie machines in casinos, it takes the mode of gambling that causes the most harm from 50% to 60%. So in-person is characterised as high risk, high turnover gambling. It's the most harmful form. Pokies are highly addictive and have been specifically designed to be very absorbing and encourage people to continuously gamble. What happens is you feed the machine and your body releases dopamine with the excitement of the prospect of winning, and the music and the bells and all the whistles and everything plays into it. You lose and you chase that excitement feeling again. And because pokies are continuous, people can't get out and frequently don't break the cycle. The Health and Lifestyle Survey in 2016 found that gambling harm is experienced disproportionately by those living in high deprivation areas. They were 4.5 times as likely to experience gambling harm, related arguments about money due to gambling. For those who gamble on pokies in pubs or clubs regularly, research shows that 49% of participants experience some gambling harm. We liken gambling harm to an iceberg. You see a bit on top, but underneath there's massive trauma and harm for families. Māori and Pacific peoples are also twice as likely to experience gambling harm. Slide 4, please. Oh, sorry, that was slide 4 before. Let's go back again, if we can. Yep. So the Shelwin resident survey, the Shelwin resident social impact assessment report, of the 644 residents who participated in the survey, 58% say gambling harms the community or is a serious problem. 69% disagree or strongly disagree that the number of pokies in the district should increase, and only 8% say gambling benefits the community. So that story is repeated across Aotearoa. And on that, the numbers of people, pokies in particular, are galvanizing people's attention. And while some will come and say to you, oh, well, actually, it's not really pokies now, it's online gambling, it's both. And the online gambling that's causing the harm, as well as the pokies, is the gambling that mirrors the behavior of a pokie machine. It's a continuous, uninterrupted play. So this is not an either or problem, this is an and problem. This is an opportunity to deal with the pokey part of it. The next slide, please. Given the harmful nature of pokies, we strongly advocate for option 2. That's a sinking lid policy with no relocations or club mergers permitted. A sinking lid policy takes on a public health and preventative approach. It tries to address those who experience mild to moderate gambling, as well as the severe gambling harm. More and more councils across New Zealand are considering a sinking lid policy. Currently, we have a record-breaking 30 councils out of 67 with a sinking lid policy. Understandably, councillors may be concerned that adopting a sinking lid will impact community funding from Class 4 grants. And if we lose less money into pokie machines, it will. There's no evidence that there's going to be reduced access to community funding, just not from gambling harm. For example, Christchurch City has had a sinking lid for almost 20 years, and the level of funding has remained consistent. This is because a sinking lid occurs slowly over time and relies on a venue closing for numbers of pokie machines to decrease in the district. Now, what we have to understand with sinking lids, they are the only tool we have available to reduce the numbers of pokie machines in Aotearoa, to reduce the numbers in poor communities. It's the only lever we've got at the moment, and we need to pull it. We need to pull it firmly and consistently. And lots of groups don't want to take pokie funding. And when you look at the numbers of it, if anybody in there can add up, let alone be an accountant, when 60% of the gambling losses go into the system and 30% of gambling losses go back in community grants, it just doesn't stack up. And what we want councils to do, we want councils to say, this model is broken. Yes, we need community funding. We want our kids playing sport. We want those things to happen, but not by taking money out of the pockets of people who can't afford to lose it. So let's advocate to change the model. And the first step to that is to have a sinking lid with no venue relocations. So next slide, please. I feel passionate about this, sorry, so I wind up getting onto is that slide 6? Fewer pokies, less harm. And the next slide will be, I've covered that, so I won't repeat it for you. Right, much of the research quoted in an attempt to denounce whether sinking lid policies work or not is outdated, and findings from a new study counters assertions made by the gaming industry. And you know, if this sounds like a head-to-head between us and the gambling industry, it is, because the trusts and societies that have the licenses have a representative organisation called the Gaming Machine Association of New Zealand, and they want to keep pokie machines operating in their communities. They've got bars and clubs that want to keep pokie machines in their communities and their businesses. We want them out of the community. So it is a head-to-head. But AUT's Auckland University of Technology's New Zealand Work Research released a report aimed at understanding the impact of public policy interventions on problem gambling. The report explored the impact of absolute caps, per capita caps, and sinking lid policies on a number of machines. The sinking lid policies are one of the most effective. It really is one of the most effective. Those TLAs who adopted restrictions above and beyond those mandated by the Gambling Act experienced less gambling harm than those TLAs who did not. And if you have less gambling harm in your communities, you have less social problems. You have more money being spent in the high street. If money's going into a pokie machine, it's not being spent in the dress shop down the road, the chemist, the car repair, new tyres. Gamblers spend every penny, we all and people who are on low, modest and medium incomes spend every penny they have. You want that money spent in the high street. And if you spend it in the high street can support the local sports team and the acting group and all the people who want community funding. The high street can from their business, because people are spending money in their businesses rather than taking the money out of the businesses into some collective somewhere, slicing off 60% of it and then drip feeding a bit back. So we just say, look, this whole model doesn't work, and sinking this is a way to get more money spent in town and not less. So this class 4 community grants, so 20% of GMP is lost, was returned to groups in Shelwin. Now we don't think, if 100% was returned to Shelwin, it can't ever be. Even if it was 80%, if it was 50%, you've still lost 50% of money that could have been spent in the high street. So let's go for a sinking lid and get money spent in the high street and money not spent, lost into pokies. Really what we're saying here is, can we please think about where the money's being, not where the money goes, but who's losing it. And that's really what we're asking. On the next slide, please. There's a lot of rhetoric about return. Industry reports that every dollar spent 91 cents. It's a misleading statement. You've heard that expression, lies, and damn statistics. This is a case in point. It's a the return from a machine is a terribly complicated and almost impossible to understand calculation. And it relies on the life of the machine, how much play the machine sees. So while 91 cents is returned eventually, this is done so randomly and occurs over the long term, often described as the game cycle of a pokie machine. Most pokie games have a large number of potential outcomes, frequently 50 million or more, which can take many years to complete. It is therefore highly unlikely that an individual player, forgot to turn that off, that an individual player will ever see 9 cents back from the 91 cents back from the dollar they spent. It's just a red herring. Think about the numbers that are lost. Think about what's being lost in Shelwin. Think about that of all the money lost, how much comes back to your community, and let's get those machines out of our poor communities. Can we have the next slide, please? Class 4 societies have downplayed the issue of harmful gambling. We've covered this. The 4 clients from Shelwin were supported by service providers in the last financial year. That is a low number. However, it's important to know that presentation to services is not the total measure of harm. And by the time a person presents to a service for help, this is true across alcohol and drugs and gambling, they are at the severe end of harm. So this is back to the idea of the spectrum of harm. We'll help you when you get here, but people don't put their hand up until they haven't paid the rent for 4 weeks, somebody's walking out of the house, they're concerned that their fraud of their employer is going to get caught out, they're going to lose their home, there's family violence. That's when people present. So don't be misled. I think that if only 4 people in Shelwin put their hand up for help, anybody will tell you that's not the number of people with the problem with gambling. So in terms of presentation, gambling harm elsewhere, 42% of clients are lotto, sports betting, casinos and online gambling. But class 4 in pokies, pubs and clubs remains by far and away the highest number of people who present with gambling harm. I've covered online gambling, but can we have the next slide, please? I just don't want to hold you up too much. So we learned some of the stuff through the various COVID lockdowns, and the Health Promotion Agency did surveys of gambling behaviour during the COVID lockdown, the first one and the second one. And there's definitely an increase in online gambling, and some of that was fueled by people buying their lotto tickets online, which online captures a lot of online activity. But as soon as the venues opened again, we had the biggest spike in online gambling and pokies that we've ever seen. So as soon as the venues were open again, people were back to playing pokies. So online has not replaced pokies. Sadly, New Zealanders are spending more. And if you think about the hardships that we've been under, and you think about the disruption to family and work, it's easy for people to fall into the trap of thinking, if I win this, it will be the end of all my problems. It's not. And people have got time, they've got internet access, and they're doing both. And when the venue's open, they go back to their preferred choice, which is to sit in front of that addictive pokie machine. So again, one of the major planks of good health promotion is to manage the environment to reduce the harm. It's true for everything. It's true for alcohol, drugs, it's true for food consumption, it's true for gambling. But the less pokie machines you have in a poor community, the less harm you're going to have. Could we have the next slide, please? And I'd like now Hong, please, to give you a perspective from the Asian community. Kia ora, Hong.
Thank you, Paula. Good morning, everyone. I'm here today to support Paula's submission, as well as present on behalf of Asian Family Services. Before we look at this, the data on the slides, I would like to share a story about the Chinese clients. I call him Ming to protect his privacy. Ming is a very popular name for Chinese people because it means bright and future. In 2018, Ming came to New Zealand from a small town from China on a work visa. He came here alone and worked as a chef for a Chinese restaurant. In the hope of reuniting with his family, his wife and his daughter, he worked day and night to try to get his residence visa approved as soon as possible. Meanwhile, with the company of his family, he was often lonely and bored outside of work. He had free time every afternoon from 2 to 4:30. During the time, he'd go to the library and take a break. And sometimes he did video calls with his family to tell them how much he missed them. But one day, Ming's life changed. His friend, a kitchen hand, took him to a pub, and Ming started playing pokies. In the beginning, he had a very clear plan on how much time and money he could spend on machines, but after a big win, he thought he'd gotten lucky. Afterward, he went to the pub in the afternoon and late at night after work. Despite losing money that he could afford, he always thought about gambling and winning. It was very sad to say that Ming's work and personal life was severely affected by gambling addiction. He lost his job because he could not concentrate on the chef work. He had trouble sleeping at night because he had to lie to his family and pretended everything was still on track. When he was referred to our services, he cried and asked us, "I changed. Why?" Since Asian Family Services was established in 1998, we've been supporting thousands of clients like me. Based on our 24 years of working experiences, Asian people play pokies for complicated reasons. Playing pokies is a game where you don't have to talk to anyone. Even you cannot speak English, you can still play it. It's a game where you can release your stress. It's a game where you can deal with your loneliness. We heard a lot from our Asian clients. "I don't want to be hooked back on the pokie machines. I want to take back control." However, the outcome is exactly opposite. Because like Paula just mentioned, pokies are highly addictive and have been specifically designed to be very absorbing and encourage people to continue gambling. Now let's have a look at the numbers on the slides. Analysis of data from health and lifestyle survey over several years shows that when compared to European and other ethnic groups, Asian people's risk for individual gambling harm was 9.5 times higher. According to the New Zealand Asian Responsible Gambling Report 2021, conducted by Asian Family Services, 27.6% Asian played gaming machines or pokies in the last 12 months. The report also indicates that Asian people are reluctant to seek help because of the stigma, shame, language, and cultural barriers. Consider me a good guy who's trying to pursue his dream living up in New Zealand, but is adversely affected by the porkies. What's the future for him? The number of Asian residents in Shelwin is steadily growing, so we strongly recommend the council takes Asian voice into account when you're making policies. With the PDF group, we've been together to advocate for the policy change for many years. Today, I'm going to say our recommendation to you loudly, and well. Please adopt a sinking lead policy, no relocations or club mergers, to really make a difference for the people who call Shelwin home. It is the best way that we can do, that council can do to protect our community from gambling harm. It is also the best way to support people like me to make their bright future a reality. Thank you.
Oh, kia ora Hong, and thank you so much. And thank you for sharing the story of your client. And that story in our services is told every day. And it's rich and poor. You would be surprised at how many people get caught by the pokies. So we're just saying it may not be the best lever we have, but it's a very good lever to reduce harm, is to have a sinking lid policy, no venue, no mergers and no relocations. And you will not, it's not something that will make a difference immediately overnight. So there won't suddenly be 15, 20 groups putting their hand up saying, councillor, can you help us because we've got no money? It's a long tail solution, this one. So there is time for a community to adapt and adjust as those machine numbers come down. We'd like to see councils with more control over where pokie machines go in the first place. A lot of councils don't like the fact that they've got no control over where they actually go. That's the regulator. And we think that councils really do need more control over that as well. So happy to answer any questions we can, deal with any areas of different information you might have heard. So please, anything we can add would be, we're open. You're on mute, Sophie, sorry.
Sorry, I thought I'd unclicked it. But thank you very much, Paula and Hong. I've got a couple of questions, but Jenny, do you have anything to ask first?
No, not at this stage. Thank you.
Okay, Jeff?
No, I have no specific questions, but thanks very much for the information that you've passed on to me. It's been very helpful.
Cool. So one question I've got is, a lot of the information that we hear does seem to be focused on urban areas, and I was just wondering if you guys have any insight on gambling in more rural areas?
Well, all the information that we've put together at the moment, it relates to pokie machines in towns, so rather than rural. We can get you information on rural gambling is largely online, provided there's internet, sufficiently strong internet. My father lives in Karamea and it's not great. But the impact, so where there is a pokie machine, we can get you the information. But in your district, and the Department of Internal Affairs are in the process of releasing venue-based information. It needs an OIA process at the moment, but they're in the process of making that available to people with a legitimate interest to protect the so-called commercial sensitivity of the venues. But you can get that. But yeah, we can do it to quite a small degree.
Fair enough. Thank you very much. That's interesting. And I did have another question. Yes. So some of the information we've received from other sources suggests that there are fewer people receiving assistance at the moment than is in your report. And I'm just wondering, is there a difference between how that information is collected by different groups?
Also, the record of presentations of services is held by the Ministry of Health, and services funded to deliver clinical treatment like we are have to provide those numbers every 6 months. And so the ministry compiles it, and then they use the Auckland University of Technology gambling study to measure harm. So we use the Ministry of Health record. If they've got a different number, I can't explain it. But and it is true, because we have just recently been through the needs assessment for the next 3 years of the gambling prevention and minimisation of gambling harm strategy. And there has been, since 2007, a decline in presentations to services. But that doesn't correlate with pokies being a mode of gambling that causes the presentation to services. There just has been a decline. And that goes back to changes to the gambling helpline. So there has been a decline in presentations to services, but that's not because sinking lid policies don't work or there's less pokey harm. They're completely unrelated.
Thank you very much, Paula. Thank you, Hong. So the next stage from here is we're hearing from a few other submitters today. We've got deliberations tomorrow, that's closed to the public. And then there'll be a report that comes to council in June or July later this year. And obviously anyone who's submitted will be able to find out what the outcome is.
Kia ora. Thank you for the opportunity. It means a lot to us that we can get and put the case to you in person, so to speak.
Cool. Thank you very much, ladies. Have a lovely day. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Kia ora, bye.
Would anybody like to go have a wee break before the next one? Or I might just go to get some more water.
So we're just waiting for our next attendee to join.
Great, thank you. I'll be back in a second.
We have our next submitter, Michelle Jones.
Awesome, thank you. Morning, Michelle, how you going? Can you hear me?
Is it my turn to go?
Ah, yes, it is your turn to go. You're a wee bit blurry, but we're all here. So I'll start with introducing us all. So I'm Sophie McInnes. We've got Councillor Jeff Bland and Councillor Jenny Gallagher here as well. We've also got Sue Atherton and John Christensen from Selwyn District Council, and Jessica Neal and Rebecca Jury from Food and Health Standards. So I know you've done hearings before, but the idea is you have 20 minutes to speak, and then we've got 10 minutes for questions and answers. And we are being live streamed as well, so you're live to the world, and we'll hold our questions until the end of your presentation. So over to you.
Hi, sorry, I appear to have the wrong name up on the Zoom, so my apologies for that. I actually didn't have much of a presentation to make today because I was unaware of the locations of the machines and the outlets were when I made my submission. So I wanted to hold a place open to be able to change my written submission based on the information that I found out. Just with time factors, I didn't get it. So basically what you've read my submission, but I just really wanted to emphasize I have real concerns that we need to have something strongly in the bylaw that we don't have TAB units in sports clubs, and I would like to keep gambling machines out of sports clubs. When I wrote my submission, I was a little bit unsure whether there were some existing ones in sports clubs. I just don't like the idea of those being in an environment where we should be encouraging kids to come in to participate for health and physical recreation. They should be a safe space for those kids to come in. So yeah, that is it. Thank you for holding open the space for me. I just wasn't 100% sure what I was going to find through some of the information I'd requested from DIA and from council, and that's actually come back that there's no existing machines or outlets in sports clubs. I would like it to be put into this bylaw that is remain the case for the future. That is me done. Thank you, guys.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I don't actually have any extra questions for you, but I do want to say thank you on the grounds that every other speaker today is from a larger organisation, and you're the only local person who is speaking to us today. And I think that's really valuable to hear from, from our actual residents. Anybody got any questions, Jeff or Jenny?
No, thanks very much, Michelle. It's good, and you're quite right. Children shouldn't be in a position where they're, encouraged whatever to be gambling. It's something I think is probably pretty much thought of across the country. Thank you.
Yep, thanks, Michelle. Appreciate that.
Have a great day, guys. Thank you for listening.
So the next thing that happens after this is we've got some more speakers later on. We have deliberations, which are a closed session tomorrow morning, and then there'll be a report written from there, and the report will come to council in June or July this year. But thank you very, very much for your time and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. I'll go and watch yours online now.
Well, we've got to, don't have anybody else until 11 now, so you might get a blank screen for a while.
I was going to say, go have a cup of tea.
Awesome. Thank you
See
very
ya.
much, Michelle.
Bye.
Bye.
So our next appointment is Niall Miller at the TAB with 11 o'clock. Do we want to adjourn and take a break until 5 to 11?
Yeah, that'd
Yeah, I
be
think
a
that
good
would
idea.
be good. Yeah.
Yep.
If you could just don't click out of the Zoom or anything, because then you have to start it again. So just mute your mics and turn the camera off, and yeah.
Sounds like a plan.
Thank you.
Thank
Awesome.
you.
See you all in about 20 minutes.
Okay, Sophie. Hey, Sue.
You got your coffee now, John, you'll be right.
Yeah. Cup of tea.
Oh, good on you. I've just had a coffee.
Welcome back, everyone. We have Niall Miller, who is in the waiting room from the TAB NZ, so I will admit him.
Awesome, thank you. Kia ora, Niall.
Sorry, I was going to unmute myself.
Thank you for joining us this morning. We're a wee bit ahead of schedule, but are you okay to start now, or would you prefer to wait until 11?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
No? Okay, cool. I'll just do a quick round of introductions. So I'm Sophie McInnes. We've also got Councillor Jeff Bland and Councillor Jenny McGallagher here as well. We've got Selwyn District Council staff Sue Atherton and John Christensen. And from Food and Health Standards, we've got Jessica Neal and Rebecca Jory. So the deal is, you've probably done this before, so you'll be aware, you've got 20 minutes for your submission, and then we've got 20 minutes allowed for questions and answers after that. We're being live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel. Not sure if anybody's watching, but it's available for the world if they want. And we'll hold our questions until the end of your presentation. So thank you very much. Away to you.
Cool. I'll just bring up my presentation.
We can see your presentation, but you are muted.
How about now? Am I coming through? Yep.
I
Excellent.
can hear you now. Brilliant. Thank you.
So I'm Niall from the TAB New Zealand, which is obviously the statutory body for all wagering activities in New Zealand. We've had a few name changes in the last couple of years. We were the Racing Board for about 20 years, and then we were RETA while we transitioned to finally come back to being racing to being TAB. Every year we return, COVID depending, between $150 to $170 million back to the New Zealand racing industry, and that supports the livelihoods of those involved in the industry, as well as the national sporting organisations for the sports that we take bets on. With respect to the actual submissions, obviously we are keen to continue the ability to establish a TAB venue within the district, and that we believe that the current Class 4 policy is substantial, and obviously we want to ensure that there's a robust relocation policy in place. Generally, with respect to TAB venues, we oppose a cap or sinking lid policy, given the alternative services that we offer, both in a pub tab or a club tab setting, as well as our online offering. we sort of see a restriction on board venues as sort of immaterial. What is a TAB board venue? That is effectively a standalone TAB, and it must by law be owned or leased by ourselves and primarily used for wagering on racing or sports betting. It does not include social venues, pubs and club offerings, and it's part of a wider offering that we have, obviously, with online. Majority of our business is done online, and I suppose the best way to describe a TAB venue is just a venue that is dedicated to providing as much information as possible to conduct a bet. TAB venues, our business is conducted with integrity, and we're committed to providing a safe and enjoyable environment for customers to wager responsibly. Our TAB venues offer one of the safest environments to partake in gambling because we have statutory obligations under the Racing Industry Act to minimise harm. We have obviously problem gambling awareness training provided to all of our employees and agents. We have internal CCTV monitoring for safety and security. We are not allowed to have automatic teller machines in our venues. We do not serve alcohol in our venues. We have modest trading hours, usually sort of between sort of 10 and 8, sort of the stock standard hours. And of course, when it comes to wagering, less than 10% of all gambling, problem gambling presentations are for wagering. When it comes to the Shelwin Class 4 policy, we believe it's reasonable with the cap. There is a robust environment of government regulation in New Zealand. New Zealand has one of the most highly regulated gambling environments in the world, and we also have one of the smallest problem gambling rates in the world of 0.2% of the adult population. Particularly with Class 4 gaming machines, the number of machines have declined considerably since the introduction of the Gambling Act in 2003, from about 25,000 down to hovering in the low 14,000s at the moment. And of course, we need to be aware of the fact that any restrictions placed upon gambling could have sort of unintended consequences of accelerating growth to other areas of gambling that are not provided in a safe, secure environment, including online offshore providers, and they are obviously, not regulated to the same degree that New Zealand gambling providers are, and obviously there's no benefits to the wider public beyond the player, and that's something that obviously all gambling providers in New Zealand do to some degree. With offshore gambling markets, this research is getting a little bit old now, but we estimated back in 2020 that around $580 million was being gambled offshore. We are obviously, as a wagering provider, extremely interested in what our wagering competitors are up to. And at the time, we believed that we were losing around about $123 million to offshore bookmakers, namely in Australia. And obviously, with that came the ability to look at what was other gambling providers offering in the sort of the casino game sort of space, and we estimated that to be around sort of 450 million at the time. We obviously are keen for people to when it comes to wagering, to bet with the TAB, because obviously the benefits go back to the New Zealand industry. So we're trying hard to sort of keep customers betting with TAB rather than the our offshore competitors. But I suppose the thing that shows there is a 56% year-on-year growth spend on the online gaming or casino market. And so that's obviously been accelerating. This was prior, or just sort of touched on the COVID sort of environment, obviously with physical stores being closed and people looking for other offerings. When it comes to the growth, we've been sort of tracking what we believe to be is spend, and this is not sort of based on turnover or revenue. It's just basically deposits on international international gambling websites. So you can see there's been a dramatic increase over the last sort of couple of years. Obviously, as technology advances, accessibility becomes a lot more easier. Again, some research it is getting a little bit older now, and it's probably been surpassed. But you can just sort of see there, obviously, that it's been growing significantly over the last couple of years. Casino games they sort of ballooned during the COVID lockdown, and it sort of has continued. When we look at one of our main competitors in Australia, Bet365, they also have a casino game offering, and you can see there around the April 2020 mark that the wagering part of the business declined, and the customers went to the online casino offering because it was more available at the time. We've done some research on what are the top 10 offshore gambling websites used by New Zealanders, and you can see there that the majority of hours spent on there is quite significant, over 4 million hours for the year to 30 June 2021. And they are all offshore providers, with sort of the odd sort of exception of number 6 there, which is SkyCity. Obviously, SkyCity has a offshore based offering, because obviously New Zealand law prevents it from conducting it within New Zealand. But obviously you can see that their market share there is sort of relatively small, of 4% of the total hours. However, when you look at their actual annual report for the same period, it shows a significant amount of money, both from a revenue and profit point of view, especially compared to the prior year when it had just been established. And as you can see there, there's some significant increases in their ability to operate in that online space, and a profit of $13 million for the year, and when they've only got 4% of the hours spent, is just shows how open and available offshore gambling is available. Of course, offshore providers, they have no restrictions, no regulations, no guarantees for players. There is actually no obligation to pay the players if they did win. There's no capacity for people to observe home minimization around gambling. They are totally accessible at any time of the day by anyone. All you need is a debit card or a credit card and access to the internet. There's obviously no ability to monitor fraud or money laundering, and it is providing an unsafe and unregulated environment compared to what is available in New Zealand. And of course, when it comes to benefits from tax or community funding, that is obviously not available. And of course, they don't contribute to the problem gambling levy that every other gambling provider in New Zealand does, which is available to use to help with home minimisation. That's pretty much my presentation at the moment. I'm quite used to rippling through it because it's sort of, you've only got sort of 10 minutes compared to the 20, but I'm more than happy to answer any questions.
Cool, thank you very much, and apologies because I've just realised I was sitting there typing notes and I didn't have myself on mute, so apologies if you had keyboard note sounds all the time. Jeff or Jenny, do you have any questions?
Thank you for your presentation. No, I don't have any questions, but I was really interested to hear you talk about the offshore gambling, because I was not aware that it is such a big part. So thank you for those comments.
That's right. It's the ability to obviously collate the data is getting on a bit, and obviously that data is obviously almost a year old now. But it's probably reinforced recently with Kiwi Bank announcing that they had around about $30 million a year, $30 million a month just deposited into gambling websites. And of course, you know, given the fact of Kiwi Bank's market share, it shows that even our estimates 2 years ago of $500 million is probably quite light.
Jeff, you got anything?
No, I have nothing to add, no questions to ask, but thank you for your information that you've provided us, Neil. That's very good. Thanks, mate.
Thank you.
I've got a couple of questions for you. Thank you for the information about online gambling. I understand DIA are doing a review on that as well. I mean, obviously our hearing is more about what is happening in Shelwin, and I get that that's part of the picture, but you know what I mean. We've had one submitter who was particularly worried about TAB machines in sports club buildings, in club rooms. Is that the sort of, as far as I'm aware, we don't have any at the moment, but is that something that does happen elsewhere in the country?
They are loosely tied with liquor licenses. So obviously if a sports club had a liquor license, you could sort of provide a controlled environment to have a betting terminal in there. But I think the fact is that basically that is also a betting terminal, and wherever you go in your hand, you have the ability to bet. Obviously, we have around about 500 pub tabs and club tabs in the country, and we have 55 TAB standard venues. So a significant amount of our retail network is in the sort of the social network, if you will. But it is obviously when it comes to a sports club environment, the offering of a TAB betting terminal would probably not be as desirable compared to a bar or a social club, due to the nature of sports clubs when they're only sort of open in the later part of the evening on a Saturday or a Sunday. So obviously it's a sort of market factors to partake in our decisions to put the betting terminals where they are, but they must be in a controlled environment, and we will need to be aware of the fact that the sports club will have obviously minors within the club rooms, and we need to be sort of mindful of that.
Thank you very much. And my other question was, I can't remember whether it was your submission, it probably was in your submission as well, the written one, around relocations that you'd like, obviously, if venues move. So part of our bylaw has some restrictions around where new venues can open. And I'm just wondering, this is kind of a hypothetical one, but I'm not sure how well you know our area, but a lot of the venues at the moment are within a residential area. One of the clauses is that if something new should not be within a residential area, but we don't actually have many non-residential areas that would host that sort of venue. And I'm just thinking, where, if a venue was to relocate, what sort of location would they be looking for? That probably doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, very interesting question, because it's all about a balance in the end of the fact that the ultimate ability to provide a safe environment and a controlled environment to gamble in is the ultimate sort of situation. And you're correct in the fact that for a more urban district, you would sort of say the argument is that the safer place for gambling environments is in what would be sort of considered to be the central business district, and not so much for a residential area. Things get a little bit different, obviously, when you start talking about sort of more rural locations that don't have a central business district, and things like that. So it is a balance between, ultimately, you want to provide the safest environment for the venue, and balance that between having a situation whereby you don't want to have them at the same time in easy or a more accessible location. So it is a fine balance. With relocation policies, it is basically the request for the industry is obviously, if something ever happened to the venue, through a natural disaster or something like that, to have the ability to sort of up sticks and move somewhere else and start again. But it is a fine balance between providing that safe environment and obviously having the ability to have it with some businesses in respect to, obviously don't want them close to places that are sort of more sort of children themed or things like that, playgrounds and schools and things like that. So it is a fine.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? No? Okay, so what happens from here? Thank you very, very much for your time. We've got closed deliberations tomorrow, so that's not live streamed, but obviously there'll be a report produced from that, and sometime in June or July that should be released to council, and obviously you'll be advised of the outcome. And yeah, thank you very much for your time and for all the information you presented to us today.
Thank you very much.
Ka kite.
Okay. Yeah. Bye.
Our next submitter at 11:30 will be Tony Goldfinch from the Lion Foundation, so I will advise you when he is ready to be admitted.
Thank you, Jessica.
What?
Excellent. Our 11:30 submitter is Tony Goldfinch from the Lion Foundation. I'll admit him now.
Thank you. Kia ora, welcome. How are you doing this fine day?
Oh, Marina, Sophie, how are you?
Yeah, not too bad. So yeah, welcome to our hearing. I'm Sophie McInnes. We've also got Councillor Jeff Bland and Councillor Jenny Gallagher on the line. From Shelwin District Council, we've got Sue Atherton and John Christensen. And from Food and Health Standards, we've got Jessica Neal and Rebecca Jory. You probably know the general deal. You've got 20 minutes to speak, and we've got 10 minutes allowed for questions and answers, roughly thereabout. And yeah, we'll hold all our questions until the end of your presentation. Does that sound good? Oh, and one last thing, we are being live streamed on the council's YouTube channel. So
No, good as gold. Thank you, Sophie, and Maureen, everybody. And yeah, can I start by just saying thank you very much for allocating me such a generous amount of time. I promise I won't take up that whole thing, and I just wanted to thank the council for, I guess, the additional opportunity to talk to you in person, just around some of the key points of our submission, I guess. So in a way of introduction, my name's Tony Goldfinch. I'm the current CEO of the Lion Foundation. So Lion Foundation in itself as an organisation is probably one of the oldest, longest serving non-for-profit community trusts in the country. We've only got one venue within the Shelwin district at the moment. And then, yeah, from our point of view, I just wanted to commend the council on the work they've done with the gambling policy. In terms of the options available at the moment, the Lion Foundation agrees and supports option one, or what is the current proposed policy around the cap of the current number of 124 gaming machines. We think, based on the data that you collected with your survey and submission information, that we think it's a very well balanced proposal that it addresses the need to control any potential growth in gambling and minimise the harm from any gambling activity within the district, while also balancing that with, I guess, the benefit that comes from Class 4 and in terms of the proceeds that are returned to community organisations and the benefit that they receive from that. From a Lion Foundation point of view, our sole purpose in life, we're privileged enough to have what we consider as a social license in terms of our non-for-profit status and the ability to distribute the funds that are generated from gaming. Our sole purpose, really simply put, is to effectively and efficiently deliver as much funds as possible that are generating from the activities that we have within our venues back to the communities where that funding is generated. We're not here to go gambling. We have no desire to go gambling, and our main focus is controlling the harm and any harm that's caused by the gambling activities that we oversee. We believe that the current Class 4 climate, in terms of the land-based environments where most of our gambling with the gaming machines occurs, is probably the safest gaming environment within the country at the moment, for a number of reasons. As pointed out in our submission, it's a very low maximum bet on machines. They're in environments that are controlled by people who have been trained in harm minimisation. They're in environments that are social, and obviously from a benefit point of view, there's signage, there's many opportunities for people to seek help from either directly from the staff or within some of the messaging that's within the environments. And obviously I say that conversely with what we've seen based on the impacts of COVID and lockdown and people spending more time at home is that growth of what we're seeing is spend in an online gambling space, which is what we believe is conversely opposite to what you get in a land-based environment and a controlled environment, in that there is no controls, there are larger bet limits, there's very little harm minimization messaging, and in fact, most of the online gambling opportunities provide incentives for people to increase their gambling. So I think even though potentially the online gambling space is outside the scope of the council's review, it is something that I would strongly recommend the council consider, because it is a real concern within the community, and it will be impacting your community within Shelwin. Whilst I mentioned that we do support the current option 1 and the cap of 124, I would encourage the council to consider potentially an open-ended policy. Obviously, there is still, having an open-ended policy does still give the council the control to consider consents on a case-by-case basis. Obviously, you've seen the population increase in the Shelwin district from when the last policy was put out to this current policy. I would imagine that population growth is anticipated to continue. And obviously that is going to require more community organisations which will benefit from any funding or any additional funding that could be generated. And once again, I believe there's, it's probably the safest way to generate those funds. And in terms of Class 4, we do a fantastic community funding model that is set up, and a gambling act that is set up that dictates that those proceeds from gambling need to go back to the community in terms of funding. From an online perspective, most of those organisations that are offering those online opportunities are offshore based, and I'm sure you've heard this from previous presenters. And from a government point of view, from a community point of view, there is absolutely no benefit going back to communities from any spend in online at the moment. So I would encourage the council to potentially, while we support the current cap, an open-ended approach still does give the council the full control on a consent application case-by-case basis. And I guess from a Lion Foundation perspective, we've had communication with the council previously where we believe there is an opportunity existing at the moment. There's an established hospitality site with a fit-for-purpose environment and a gaming room that could safely generate some additional funds for the Shelwin community without increasing any risk to the local community. Obviously, Shelwin has got a very low incidence of problem gambling, and we believe that activity would certainly not increase the opportunity for additional harm by introducing some additional machines in what is an extremely well-established, safe environment and an experienced operator. So, and I think that's just one example. There could be other examples in the future that by having a restrictive policy with a cap doesn't allow the council to consider those opportunities on a case-by-case basis. So pretty much in summary, the key parts of our thing is we're not here to grow gambling. We spend a lot of time minimising harm. We support any initiative that increases the venue's opportunity or the staff's ability to minimise harm and supervise those players that are in their gaming environments. And we believe that there is an opportunity for the council to be a little bit more, I guess, open-ended in the policy that they have. And that, honestly, that was pretty much for me, Sophie, unless anyone's got some questions.
Okay, thank you very much for your words there, Tony. Sorry, I keep wanting to call you Goldie because that's what it's got on the screen.
Either is fine.
I've got a couple of questions, but I'll let Jenny and Jeff go first if they would like to say anything.
Thanks, Sophie. No, thanks very much for your submission, but I've got nothing that I need to ask you at this stage. Thank you.
And Jeff?
Yeah, just one question, Tony, and you may be able to help me out. How does the Lion Foundation itself go about minimising harm from gambling?
Well, we have an operational harm minimisation policy as an organisation that then transfers down to the venues, Jeff. Each venue has their own individual venue harm minimisation policy. So that's very prescriptive. We would probably, our operations staff on the ground would probably spend 70% of their time in harm minimisation training activities, training staff. The other thing we've done is significantly invested in what we call a learning management system. Where we've found difficulties in the past is actually with high turnover in hospitality sites is being able to effectively engage in a timely manner with staff. For example, you could be at a venue 1 week and be training staff, and then a week later there's 2 new staff members that also need training. So one, we need to focus on engagement and timeliness. So module that people dial into either on their telephone or from a device that's supplied in the venues and do their harm minimisation training. The other thing we do, Jeff, is we pay into the problem gambling levy each year. So for a Lion Foundation, that's over $800,000 per annum that we pay to a problem gambling levy that goes to Ministry of Health for them to deliver, harm minimisation and problem gambling services. So I guess I'll take the opportunity as a sector. That contribution annually is circa of $20 million a year. So it gives the Ministry of Health significant resource to come up with some initiatives that we hope will help address those that do need support the most.
Thanks very much for that. That's great.
Awesome. So one question I had was, in your written submission, there's mention of some facial recognition technology for spotting regulars and that sort of thing.
Yes.
Is that something that's just within Lion Foundation venues, or is that across the other providers as well?
No, that's across the other providers as well, Sophie. And it's probably technology that came out 2.5, 3 years ago and has progressively evolved and become more, I guess, more effective in helping staff meet their minimisation obligations. It's mainly used for those that, whether you know it or have some know about the exclusion order and the exclusion order process. So if someone has identified themselves as having an issue, they can complete an exclusion order. We now have a system where they can exclude themselves from multiple venues via one order. And what that means is technically they've identified themselves, or they've been identified by the venue manager. There's an agreement drawn up that they will not enter the gambling environment of those venues. And certainly facial recognition technology, once those photos are loaded into the facial recognition system, support staff in trying to identify any of those excluded persons that may be trying to re-enter the gaming environment for whatever reason. Historically, we've relied on photographs. An exclusion order can have a period of up to 24 months. So you can imagine it's very hard for staff to be able to recognise someone from what can be a pretty grainy sort of photo 2 years after the fact. So facial recognition technology is something we certainly support. Sadly, it's very expensive. And as I say, the decision, that has to come from societies is just making sure that we are putting that technology into areas that it's needed the most.
Okay, cool. Thank you. That's really interesting.
But it is, in summary, a very effective tool.
Yeah. So the other question I had was, you mentioned that, so you've got one venue in Shelwin at the moment, and I wasn't sure when you spoke before about adding some extra machines, whether that was to a new venue or to the same venue.
No, that was to a new venue, but it's an existing venue that's been operating in Shelwin since about 2018.
Okay, and because part of our bylaw is around, oh, sorry, it's frozen.
No. Sorry, Sophie, have you got me back?
You're back.
Sorry. Sorry, you continue, I can hear you.
Okay, there was around, so part of our bylaw is around where new venues would be allowed. So even if it's an existing hospitality venue, presumably to be considered as a venue for pokie machines, it would have to meet, you know, the whole thing around residential, not being close to residential or anything else. I mentioned this to the previous speaker, like, so because our townships are quite small, there isn't really anywhere that is within a township that isn't, you know, we don't have a big CBD that you can say it's 500 meters in any direction from, you know, the nearest school or residential area, because that's how small our towns are. So it's like, so yeah, does that fit with what you are thinking of with this particular venue then?
Yeah, it's my understanding that the current location does comply with the operative district plan in terms of the zoning. So, you know, potentially it would be an opportunity and would comply with the current zoning requirements in the plan.
Fair enough. Cool. Okay. I think that's all from me. Thank you very much for your time. Is it, before I say ka kite, is anybody, no other questions? No, no, excellent. All right. So what happens from here is we've got one more speaker, I think. And then tomorrow we have deliberations. They're private, but the report will be produced sometime and given to council sometime in June or July this year, obviously, not next year. And all submitters will be advised of the outcome of the process. So thank you very much for your time and the information you presented today.
Nami, Sophie, and thanks everyone, and thank you again for the opportunity to talk to you in person. Much appreciated.
Ka kite, have a lovely day.
Bye-bye.
Our next submitter is due at 12 p.m, so we have a little bit of time because he's not quite in the waiting room yet. So I will advise you when he is there.
Awesome. Thank you very much, ladies.
Recording stopped.
Excellent. Our final submitter today, Jared True from the Gambling Machine Association, will now be admitted.
Kia ora, Jared. Welcome to our
Hello.
hearing.
Thank
How are
you.
you doing this morning?
Right, thank you.
Nearly this afternoon even. Cool. So we'll just start with a quick round of introductions. My name is Sophie McInnes. We've also got councillors Jeff Bland and Jenny Gallagher on the line. From Selwyn District Council, we've got John Christensen and Sue Atherton. And from Food and Health Standards, we've got Jessica Neal and Rebecca Jory. So yeah, you probably know the general run of things. We've got up to 20 minutes for you to speak, and then 10 minutes question and answers. We'll hold all questions until the end of your presentation. But also we're being live streamed on the council's YouTube channel. So that's, yeah, not sure how many people are watching, but it's available to the world. And yeah, over to you, sir.
Thank you. I'll share my screen. Yes, I'm Jared True. I represent the Gaming Machine Association of New Zealand. The association represents the vast majority of gaming machine societies, a number of clubs, and also some hospitality. New Zealand has their support and assistance as well. We're asking you today to look at, we support the introduction of the slightly increased cap to 124 machines. And we believe that's entirely appropriate, particularly in light of your population increase. The cap, as proposed, is entirely reasonable, given the low problem gambling rate, the benefit that comes from having the local machines, and the growth of online gambling. I note that Shelwin again continues to be soaring as far as population growth goes, with population having increased since the last review from 60,000 through to 74,000. And accordingly, it's entirely appropriate to increase the cap slightly to keep perspective with that population growth. If we look at the problem gambling rate is already extremely low. 0.2% of adult New Zealanders recorded as problem gamblers. That's in relation to all forms of gambling, not simply playing on a gaming machine. The treatment providers, either through the 0800 helpline service, the email service, the text service, or the face-to-face service, as part of their funding requirements, they ask all the people that contact them which territorial authority they belong to, and that's recorded and published each year. So in the Shelwin district, if we look at your figures compared to other relative districts by way of population, your presentation numbers are extremely low. In fact, in the last 12-month period, there was no new person from the Shelwin district that phoned the 0800 number, had any face-to-face counselling, or sought help through the text or email service. And the services that you have locally only saw 2 people in total, and they related to people that had presented the prior year. Importantly, there's no link between game machine numbers and problem gambling rates. Over the last 10 years, we've seen over 4,600 machines being removed from the market. That's a 25% reduction. However, in the same 10-year period, the problem gambling rate has remained the same. The range of benefits that come from having the machines, it's player entertainment. People enjoy gambling. Over 67% of us gamble at least once a year. The machines raise significant funds for the local community. Over $1.1 million is raised each year and made in local grants. There's also other regional and national grants that provide a local benefit. That funding is significant and simply not able to be replaced. If council was looking to adopt a more restrictive policy, regard needs to be had to what the unintended consequences of that. So a more restrictive policy is likely to accelerate the migration of the spend to offshore-based online providers and actually be counterproductive in respect of harm minimization. People are already very, very familiar with gambling online, very comfortable with gambling online. The TAB, over 60% of all their turnover is now done via phones or via tablets. If we look at My Lotto, people buying their lotto tickets online, 2018, we had 748,000 registered players. That's now over 1.2 million registered players. In 2018, there was about $200 million spent each year online with Lotto. Now that's more than doubled, over to 430 million. Similar figures in relation to Sky City's online casino. I've got an offshore-based online casino where you can play the game machines that are exactly the same game machines that are in our venues. You can go and play them on their online casino. The only difference is that the machines are faster. You can bet more per spin. The prizes are higher, and it's all done on your credit card. If we look at the explosion of just their site alone, 2018, they had 25 registered players within New Zealand. Now they've got close to 50,000 registered players. 2018, about $215 million was spent. We're now close to $800 million a year getting spent on that one site alone. And offshore-based online gambling is clearly undesirable. There's no local grants. There's no local employment. There's no funding going back through for the New Zealand government by way of taxation. There's no harm minimisation regulations or controls. There's very, very large prizes that are offered. Maximum prize you can win in our single machine is $500. If you win the jackpot, the maximum you can win is $1,000. Hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars worth of prizes are offered online. There's also in the online environment frequent inducements to gamble. If you deposit $50 into your account to play, you quite often have a bonus payment that would match that payment, and you're given $100 worth of credit. And in our environment, you actually need the cash to play, and there's no inducements made to gamble. Thank you, and welcome your questions.
Thank you very much, Jared. That was short and succinct. Jeff or Jenny, do you have any questions?
Thank you very much for that, Jared. No, I don't have any questions, but thanks for supplying us the information that you have.
Welcome.
Yes, thank you, Jared. I don't have any questions either. Thank you.
Okay, and I don't have any questions for you either, other than just noting that I believe DIA are running a review into online gambling at the moment as well. So obviously it's something that we need to consider, but it's not something that we can really make a huge difference on in terms of this particular bylaw. But yeah, thank you very much for your time and for the information you presented. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And, yeah, the process from here is we have deliberations tomorrow morning. That's a closed session. Report will be in with council sort of June or July, and then obviously the outcome will be sent round to anyone who's submitted.
So thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cheers. Ka kite.
Excellent, that concludes the submitters we needed to see this morning. We will now conclude the meeting and end the live stream on YouTube.
Awesome, thank you.
Thanks for your work, Jess and Rebecca. It's been fantastic again.
All good. We'll see you tomorrow for your deliberations anyway.
Yeah, and thank you to anybody who happens to actually be watching on YouTube.